Ortega. Maybe we'll just give it one more minute because we're also waiting on the county manager. So we're waiting on Commissioner Ortega and Commissioner Reinhardt. It's National Puppy Day and my puppies are misbehaving. So I'm trying to get them to calm down.
You're just excited.
They've been waiting for this day too. The economic competitive and inclusion plan is out. Even the puppies are excited. Okay, we have critical mass on our commissioners. I'm sure Commissioner Ortega will be joining us shortly. I am really excited. I know the team is really excited. This is literally the day we've all been waiting for. Here it is, the economic competitive and inclusion plan. And you know, the reason this is so exciting is because we talk about equity. We talk about how we're going to do this work. And this is how we actually will achieve those equity goals. We're talking about people's day-to-day lives in our county, not just when they use our services. Our focus on housing and economic development will bring transformative benefits to people who are struggling with high housing costs and neighborhoods that need the kind of investment and development without displacement that our communities are asking for. And so this is the day that we roll out the plan that all the work has gone to. And so everyone who has worked on this plan, from economic development and the Center for Economic Inclusion and Fourth Economy and Workforce Solutions, everyone who's been a part of it, my whole humble and heartfelt thank you to you of gratitude. I also want to give a special shout out before I turn it over to the amazing artists, which you're going to all be able to see and learn about. This is a really beautiful plan that's fun to read, it's fun to look at, and it really demonstrates the inclusivity of our work here in Ramsey County. And so without further ado, not to steal her thunder, to the great Carrie Collins, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much. This really is an exciting day, and we've got certainly a lot to be proud of, but we've got a lot of work ahead of us as well. So Martha, if you wouldn't mind, we'll dig right in and get into the next slide here. Oh, there you all are. All right, so we'll walk through a variety of the slides and dig into the recommended actions. But before we do that, we'll kind of introduce the plan and the 18 months of work. So go for it. Next slide, Martha. All right, for those that are just tuning in, this again has been 18 months of energy and engagement, virtual engagement, focus groups, community meetings, surveys, a website with the help of NAO partners in terms of engagement. We had a steering committee, we had wonderful engagement, but we also had various stops at the board as well, board workshops, initially around our housing analysis, and then fiscal health analysis, our industry analysis, and then our strategies overview. So that was the extent of our board workshops for 2020. Most recently, we were able to share the strategies and priority recommended actions with suburban elected officials at a city county joint meeting on February 3rd, and then also with the City of St. Paul Council and Mayor Carter as well on March 3rd. And we're so excited. There's a collective energy, not just internally here at the county, but across the geography that is Ramsey County with our municipal leaders and community leaders. And this was done really with a lot of their great feedback and community insights. So next slide, please. For the full extent of the plan, we won't be able to touch on all of the slides, but you can go to the link ramseycounty.us/economic inclusion, where you will see the full report and the illustrations. You'll see it divided into sections, so you can really look at the specifics around the recommended actions, and that is the homepage for our plan today. All right, next slide. All right. So here you'll see the cover with the three illustrations from our 3 local artists, and we'll talk about them momentarily. But this really encapsulates the kind of inclusive economy that this plan is intending to build. Next slide, please. about the planning partnership. This was a collective effort across many individuals, time, and we'll talk about that at the end in terms of trying to identify the range of thank yous. You'll see many of the participants on here today are from many of these organizations. Fourth Economy, Rich Overmeyer is on the call. MC Strategies, Maria Zimmerman. They're part of the kind of Anchor Research Hub on economic competitiveness. And Center for Economic Inclusion was our strategic advisor to our equity initiatives. NAO Partners led the engagement piece, and Urban 3 provided a fiscal health analysis of our county. So the goal was to create a comprehensive plan, and all of these wonderful, amazing agencies contributed their time and energy to do just that. Next slide. The 3 local artists that you see today brought this plan to life through illustrations and imagery that are beautiful, that capture why we have built this plan and where we're trying to go. Leah Jackson, Mayumi Park, and Kuvu were contracted through the Help Us Springboard for the Arts with Fourth Economy, and they each got sections of the plan and were inspired to bring it to life. And we cannot even begin to thank them and share our gratitude for them to be able to illustrate such a plan and to bring this inclusive economy to life in the way that they did. And so as you go through the full extent of the plan, you'll see more about them and what inspired them in their artwork. So thank you to these 3 artists. You'll also see on their artist pages a link to various Instagram accounts. We encourage you to check out their artwork as well. These 3 women are amazing. And on to really amazing things as well. Next slide. All right. Planning during an unprecedented time. Certainly the feedback from the meeting this morning is a continuation of this, but 2 years ago, Ramsey County sought to define its role in economic development with the intent to not duplicate the work of the state office, whether that be DEED or Minnesota Housing, or that of our local jurisdictions or municipal partners in economic development. Our intent was to identify the gaps and allocate existing or future resources to ensure the wheels of our local economy were moving at a pace that positioned Ramsey County to compete with that of other comparable regions. We developed this roadmap while enduring a global pandemic that continues to shine a floodlight on the inequities and disparate health outcomes of our communities of color. We developed a roadmap during a time of racial reckoning following the murder of George Floyd. And we developed a roadmap during the most divisive election of our time and a subsequent insurrection. And now we present the plan during a time where, as was discussed at the meeting this morning, our Asian American and Pacific Islander community are experiencing fear as a result of recent hate crimes and hate speech. After the year we have had, it's easy to see how some may grow apathetic, overwhelmed, and numb to equity work. However, we have an opportunity to dig within and ensure as leaders, we are not going to succumb to the world as we know it. We will be fueling an inclusive economy where all are truly valued and thrive. So this plan is not an exercise. It doesn't check a box, and it isn't merely a pledge to do better. This is an action plan and a declaration that our intention as a system and an institution is that we will actively combat the intentionally exclusive, racially restrictive policies of the past with a roadmap that identifies the intentionally inclusive policies, investments, and programs that will position the wheels of our economy not only to move vigorously as one, but an economy with equitable opportunity for all to drive. So with that said, I will segue over to the next slide, and that is Tawana Black.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Carrie. I want to say a big thank you to Ramsey County itself for taking the opportunity to lead our state in creating the first plan of this kind, a plan that centers racial equity in the county's economic competitiveness and growth. As a leader in this state, by prioritizing racial equity and inclusivity as one of the first elements of being able to pull a lever that can ensure that this county continues to prosper, not in spite of its diversity, by mitigating its diversity, but because of its diversity. This plan and our team of planners, the residents of Ramsey County and business owners of Ramsey County have partnered intentionally to ensure that the policies actions and investments that you see centered in this plan are intentionally elevating the communities of color, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian communities throughout this county as assets in the county's future growth. At the same time, as Carrie just illustrated, taking intentional effort to talk about what it takes to dismantle institutional racism, both within the walls of Ramsey County, but also within the walls of businesses throughout the county and other jurisdictional efforts. Throughout this plan, we've taken the time to quantify what the economic imperative is for the county, as you see illustrated on the slides that you see before you. We've taken the time also to talk about what it takes for intentional collaboration with those communities of color, what it means to partner in housing, economic development, workforce development, and land use planning, to be intentional about shared power, about co-creation, about relationship building and changing our mental models at the same time that we move forward with investments and partnerships that can start to rewrite not only the future, but also rewrite the way that we acknowledge the history of Ramsey County at the same time that we rewrite the future. We believe that this is not only a good thing to do, but that this is also required in order for Ramsey County's economic competitiveness and inclusivity to continue to move forward in a way that is good for all residents and all business owners throughout the county. It is quantifiable, it is measurable, it's intentional, and it's required in order for Ramsey County to continue to lead our state in our ability to continue to move forward in shared prosperity. We've done the hard work of ensuring that everyone has been included in this conversation, that people have been included in ensuring that their own assets, the many different efforts that are taking place throughout all of Ramsey County, that we're building upon those, that the county is pulling its own strength and levers, that the other racial inclusivity efforts that are within the county are leading us in these efforts, whether in the economic development department, workforce development, or housing, but that also we're not shying away from those places that are hard, not shying away from those places that cause us to get uncomfortable and cause us to need to redesign entirely those policies and procedures that in the past we've gone about by simply tinkering around the edges. And you'll see that within this plan, recognizing that it may cause us to continue to adapt it over the years that we go forward in implementing this plan. And at this time, Denitrick will talk to you about what it took to bring the community forward in this plan to center those very voices that sometimes are not elevated in our policies and procedures, and how community engagement and those voices have driven us in creating the plan.
Good morning, everyone. As Tawana and Kari mentioned, the last 12 months of this plan and effort has been challenging, but I can say it has given us all an opportunity to sit with the truths of our local disparities and inequities. Our strategic decision to go virtual due to COVID, it challenged us all to communicate in different ways, but it also made us realize that the process of engagement isn't a one-stop shop. We had numerous public meetings, interviews with local leadership, door knocking when we could, and a website that housed our surveys, forums, as well as an archive of the presentations throughout the plan. Throughout the engagement process, three things were reinforced. One, that community members, they're critical, rightfully so, but they're also encouraged that the outcomes of this plan will make a difference. Second, that there has been overwhelming support of this plan, especially its efforts on focusing on BIPOC wealth building, in particular, Black communities. As we see many questions from the county's Equity Action Circle about who this plan is centering, who is this plan centering? And lastly, that the county and its staff, they have built strong relationships at the grassroots level, particularly and especially through their responses through COVID. Next slide.
All right, back to you, Tawana, I believe.
Sorry, apologies, technical difficulty there with my buttons there. So our plan has allowed us to be able to be intentional about the various strategies that allow us to be able to move the county forward. You see the opportunity here for us to highlight place-based economic growth and inclusion, as well as fostering competitiveness. These outcomes will help us move forward in both ensuring that we are not only growing the county in ways that help us prosper, in ways that are healthy for the entire community, but also ensure that we move forward in ways that move everyone toward wealth equality and wealth equity, recognizing that income equality is important for us, but ultimately we have an opportunity to address historic wealth extraction that is taking place, particularly in our Black and Indigenous communities, while also ensuring that we're moving forward the entire communities in ways that allow us to prosper and enhance access to opportunity, mobility for all residents and businesses throughout the county. And those are ultimately the goals that we have for this plan. Next slide, please. In our consideration of this plan, we've highlighted opportunities for us in investment, policy, programs, and coordination, and you'll see this highlighted throughout the plan as we go forward in each of the areas. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn over to Maria.
Great, thank you, Tawana. And it's great to be with you all here today to talk about, I'm going to kind of walk us through the place-based strategies that are part of the plan. And we've had lots of conversations, as you know, over the last 18 months. We've shared a lot of data with you and with community members, and we're really grateful to have our conversations and our ideas and recommendations informed by the working groups, the steering groups, so many folks who are involved in communities, in localities, with state housing partners, with regional housing partners, both from the affordable housing and nonprofit side, as well as government and the private sector side. So the plan includes a few of kind of the key data factoids and data points. And as this slide is showing, really a critical need and opportunity for the county is to preserve the affordable housing that currently exists, to preserve it, but also to really prioritize opportunities to improve the quality of that housing stock as well in this process. We have some affordable housing that is subsidized, but we have a lot that is not subsidized and is frequently referred to as naturally occurring affordable housing, which this map is showing. And really looking and identifying the need through the housing assessment to prioritize and address the shortage of existing affordable housing that exists for our lowest income households. And so we talk a lot in the plan about households at 30% AMI or 50% AMI. And so this slide is sort of breaking that down so we can see who these families are, what that income level means, and what you can afford at that income level. And you can see here, it's really a housing stress for a lot of people unable to find housing that is safe, that is healthy, that is available and close to jobs. So we really want to center that priority in our plan. Next slide, please. We also, in the plan, one thing that we're really excited about is thinking about economic inclusion and competitiveness. And we talk a lot about the housing cost burden. Housing cost burden is, in some ways, a technical term the housing community uses, but really it's looking at how much are households spending on housing and what percentage of overall household cost does that represent, which tells us both the income levels that households are making. And so how do we think about increasing incomes for households, but how do we also think about reducing those housing burden costs? We know in the county, 48% of renters are housing cost burden, meaning they're spending more than 30% of their income just on housing. And we know that cost burden is disproportionately felt on Black households, Latinx households, Asian and Indigenous households. And so again, really a priority for the county to look at how we can address housing cost burdens that too many of our households are facing. Part of this is that we also, again, are seeing a real shortage of housing affordable to our lowest income households. So we see across the county population and employment growth that's happening in local jurisdictions. And while we have housing that is affordable to many households, it's getting more stressed as that population and economic growth is happening. Rents are rising, home values are rising. So next slide, please. And then certainly a lot of work that the county and other partners in the region have been doing to look at the history of redlining and also the fiscal health analysis. And so again, all of these factors that help to inform our recommendations and really think about how do we address some of these historic inequalities, but also how do we leverage some of the opportunities where we see the value of living near lakes, rivers, parks, transit, economic corridors, and the like. So next slide, please. So focusing in on our strategies, and again, we've discussed some of these at some level before, but we have 4 key priority strategy areas. And really they're around centering our housing approach and our place-based approach to preserving and modernizing affordable housing, to how we can increase production of units and home ownership, of how we can prioritize where the county is investing and engaging and who we're working with and really centering this work upon, and how do we prepare sites so that it is easier for development to occur in places that really do provide economic and transportation and quality of life opportunities. So let's dig into these a bit. Next slide, please. This is a lot going on this slide, and we'll kind of break it apart in the next few pages, but we wanted to show you in the plan itself, we really look at a set of recommended actions, what kinds of actions those are, as Tawana was mentioning, kind of thinking about the prioritization of timing for the county. We really wanted to recognize in this plan capacity constraints and being realistic about those constraints, whether they're financial constraints and really how do we leverage and think smartly about money that the county has and is available through federal, state, local, county resources, but also how do we recognize the existing capacity of staff? And so we can't do everything at once. And so thinking about what are our priorities to move things, to hold ourselves accountable through measuring success and through, again, really centering and kind of ground truthing our recommendations by what we heard from the community. So next slide, please. So digging into the first strategy a bit more, again, the set of recommended actions here, kind of the key themes that come out is we're really looking at the need to increase the amount of financial resources, funding that is available in the county to support the work that needs to be done. And so a really key priority and commitment by the county is to activate its HRA levy authority. And this is a priority. You can see here conversations already in 2021 and looking to have that underway in 2022. That HRA levy will provide much needed resources that we really want to think about how those funds can then further leverage other housing resources that hopefully will also be coming available from the federal, state, and existing resources. So funding is a key part of what are represented through these actions. Also really a high priority around coordinating and partnership. And so again, thinking about with this plan and with other plans that are in place, how can the county bring together and be part of conversations with Minnesota Housing, with the Met Council, with localities to really think about how do we most strategically utilize the resources that we have available to really ensure that they're consistent with our goals for this plan. You can see here a few acronyms jumping out. And so thinking again, how these new resources can be used to help support preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing through strategic acquisition and really thinking about those, how we can address climate and energy efficiency costs and challenges that we know renters and homeowners are facing. And so thinking about that and also thinking into the future, how can we grow the portfolio of small scale housing developers to increase the number of Black, Latin, Asian, and Indigenous developers who are working in this space. So those are some of the key things from this slide. The other thing I want to point out is also really thinking about opportunities, not just around construction, but how to support tenants and how to, again, partner with localities to make sure that new developments and existing developments getting support are really centering the needs and the opportunities around renters and those to make sure we're not displacing households at the same time that we're also intervening to make improvements to our affordable multifamily housing. So next slide, please. Again, we've outlined in the plan a series of measures for success that we want to track and monitor over time. Next slide. Our second strategy is around expanding affordable home ownership opportunities and improving housing stability. And again, many of the recommendations here are really seeking to address the historic inequities, especially in home ownership rates and wealth creation for our BIPOC households. So next slide, please. Part of this, again, is to think about really strategic use for those new levy funds that the county will be pairing again with other additional resources into the county. And so to think about that alignment that can happen, but also how the county can make more information more readily available to more households about the existing resources that either the county has or other partners who are working on addressing the homelessness issues, home ownership and down payment opportunities, tenant protection issues. And so really kind of centering a number of these on increasing the role that the county can play, even with its own website, to make sure that information is readily available in a variety of languages, and even to those who have visual impairments, that they know where they can access information through and by the county. Also really looking at opportunities to elevate investments in resiliency, climate resiliency, energy efficiency, helping cities, working with them, finding ways to provide more information so that people have a better sense of the full cost of housing as they're looking at where in the county to call home. And again, thinking about ways that the county with new resources or even with existing resources can think about opportunities to provide more resources that help people make investments to stay in their home, to improve the quality and safety and operating costs of their home. And then the last thing I want to call out here, which we've had some conversation about before, is the opportunity the levy provides to really address, again, historic redlining, the destruction of the Rondo community, to look at opportunities in partnership with the city of St. Paul to support homeowners through possible funding or tax incentives that could help to really shore up some of the right to return efforts that are underway and conversations that are happening. Next slide. Again, measures of success that we've noted out here for the strategies we just talked about. And let's go to the next slide again. Alrighty, our third strategy is around fostering inclusive economic development within county transit and key commercial corridors. Again, we know that the needs exceed resources that will be available even with the county levy resources. And so thinking about what are our priorities for the county in terms of people? And again, we talked about really centering the needs for very low income households, for addressing historic racial inequalities, but also thinking about key corridors within the county where the county is making investments along with other partners to improve transit, to really marry some of the recommendations you'll hear about economic development and key corridors. We know there are already a number of key commercial and cultural corridors within the county, and so really prioritizing those through these next set of actions. So next slide, please. Hopefully you can see those a little better here. What we have within these is, again, thinking about how we can prioritize and position opportunities within the county that are in these key corridors. Kind of first off, looking to allocate some dedicated resources to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency's consolidated request for proposals. This is such an important tool that exists in the region of really looking for funding from the state for low-income housing tax credits, for other important financial resources. So how can we partner with localities and developers to really position projects that are coming forth to be as competitive as possible, looking at opportunities for the county's underutilized public lands and developing a strategy to think how we can make better use, again, how we can prioritize the redevelopment of those lands to support affordable housing and other community serving goals through creating an equitable development framework. And also, again, looking at opportunities to utilize funding to do some strategic acquisition of sites along these corridors to preserve them for long-term affordability or for other community serving needs. So we think this is really a critical opportunity. And there's been some discussion in the region about right of first refusal. We know other parts of the country where counties have been a partner in these conversations. And so we want to kind of be part of those discussions and see, is that something that makes sense for the county, and how could something like that be potentially structured? So next slide, please. As part of this, we really want to increase the number of affordable housing projects and low-income housing tax credits that are coming into these corridors, again, to ensure that we can have growth, transformation, improvement in our communities, but people are not going to be displaced in the communities while the county is making these important investments. And so I think really centering and making a commitment to anti-displacement while also committing to future economic growth and opportunity is really a core goal, and something we want the county to look at ways to hold ourselves accountable. So next slide, please. So our last set of strategies under this place-based category is around supporting communities in equitable site development. Equitable development really looks at how do we elevate equity in the process and in the product that's coming out of this, and thinking about opportunities for the county to work in partnership with localities to reduce barriers, not just barriers to development, but barriers to inclusion. So where we have areas where we're not allowing, multifamily housing, or where our barriers are making it more challenging for low-income homeowners or others to be part of our community conversation, we want to look at, are there ways in partnership with localities we can provide more information, we can bring people together, we can have these conversations. So next slide, please. So as you can see here, a first really core part underneath this bucket of actions is to create an equitable development policy for Ramsey County. So to hold itself accountable, to have that policy in place. So again, as we think about redeveloping underutilized parcels, or when the county is an investment partner, what are the principles and the goals building off of this plan that we can really move into that implementation phase. So again, we move from plan and aspiration to reality, and what's happening and what we're funding and how we're working into that work. So that will be an effort that's done also in partnership with other folks. And as you can see here, a number of the other recommended actions are really around partnerships. They're around education, they're around guidance, technical assistance. How can we be building the county's own technical capacity and technical expertise in partnership with localities and others? And this is a region that benefits from having some great thought partners, whether folks at the Federal Reserve, to the Urban Land Institute, to area nonprofits, to the universities. So really thinking about how do we leverage that and take full advantage of that so that we're all moving together towards equitable development, and really preparing sites to help to reduce the costs of development, which we know housing costs, construction costs continue to increase. And so we want to really look at ways to get ahead of that. And there you can see as well our measures of success once again. So that was a lot of information we walked through quickly. A lot of it you've heard before, but wanted to kind of share the full sense there. And would love for Denitrik or Tawana, I know if you want to call out anything from the community conversation, since I went really fast, if there are pieces there that, again, as we've been in conversation with community, particularly speak to some of what we heard.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Of course, affordable housing was overwhelmingly kind of one of the main things that we heard during community engagement. Though people did not just think of community housing, affordable housing in a vacuum. A lot of residents and community members realize that affordable housing is, key to them being able to, affordable housing in proximity to jobs and proximity to transportation is key for them. So many community members during engagement didn't just ask for affordable housing, but also advocated for affordable housing in near TOD as a part of TOD strategies. We also had, local landlords as a part of our community action team, which was a group of, residents of Ramsey County, landlords who own small multifamily property, who also want access to county resources so that they can be conscious and make their properties more affordable for their tenants.
So now we will turn it over to Rich, who will walk through the next set of strategies. And then I think we're having conversation, but interrupt me, Carrie, if I have that order wrong. Thumbs up. Okay, Rich.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Thanks, everyone. Again, thank you for the opportunity to obviously work with you on this very important project for Ramsey County. The leadership that's been shown has been impressive. And we're super proud of the team that's been working on this and the input we've gotten from the community. So I'm going to walk you through the economic competitiveness portion. So we can go to the next slide. Yeah, throughout you'll see in the plan information about the artists. We were so impressed with the work and their engagement throughout. It's not every day that we get the opportunity to bring a plan to visual life as we have done in this case. And so again, the creativity and leadership shown by the county and certainly with Carrie and Martha and the team has been impressive. Similar to the other sections, you'll see this is really the spread view of how the plan lays out. If we go to the next slide, I'll highlight a couple of the areas that I think we should be thinking about. I think as we, undertook the work of on the economic side of this, which is largely, usually the traditional side of economic development planning, I think we saw some opportunities. Certainly the industry mix that Ramsey County has provides it a good base to work from, even despite, the issues that we've been dealing with in the last year because of COVID. You do see strong employment in a lot of the sectors. Certainly that doesn't mitigate, the impacts that are being had across the county, but we still see a strong base of employers that are there that do have the potential to grow jobs. We saw a lot through the community engagement and through talking to businesses and economic development leaders, really desire to support small business and especially focus on Black, Latinx, Asian, and the indigenous communities. Those businesses, as you'll see in some of the data in the plan, have been growing at levels that exceed averages both within the region and the state. So we really think that's an opportunity as we think about recovery to really double down on the focus on those businesses and help provide capital for their growth. Next slide, please. Yeah, and throughout, we've kind of highlighted a few of the data points that I think, stood out to us as we engaged in the community. One is, the county has been growing, but as you'll see, and I think a chart probably on the next page, I think the county's been growing over the period that we looked at 8.3% versus the US average of 16%. So we see some room for improvement there. Again, a lot of that could be, related to the capital needs. We see low business starts and lending compared to other regions in the nation. And so obviously you'll see some strategies and actions that are meant to address that. And again, that's particularly important here. The point here about Black, Latinx, Asian, and Indigenous owned businesses grew at 3.5 times the rate of Minnesota companies, but they're still lagging other geographies around the country. And so we see that as an opportunity that can be addressed through this effort. Throughout this, we kind of looked at some targeted needs, and you'll see that throughout, but I think I'll highlight a couple things on the next slide for sake of time. Yeah, here, I think you'll see some of that data. I think next slide probably provides a highlight of a couple of the other pieces. Yes, you'll see here, I think there is opportunities. You see the commuting patterns within the region, that there are a lot of folks that come into Ramsey County for work. We see that as an opportunity as we also talk about the housing side of this to grow the overall population and make sure housing is affordable for those residents. I think, we look at some data, disparity data in terms of wages and education rates, and you see there's opportunities here to invest in hope, both in the training side, as well as hope that more investment in terms of the business communities can happen as a result of this work. So next slide, please. Yeah, in that growth, I mentioned that statistic. I think in the bottom left here, you'll see those areas where there has been growth, but it has been lagging the US. And so things that we've really focused on, professional and technical, the arts and recreation, finance and insurance are all areas that we see a core group of businesses with the potential to grow. I think they just need some more fuel to catalyze that growth as we look to the next few years. Next slide. So yeah, similarly to on the other side here, I think we're looking at a more economically competitive community. And so we've got 4 strategies that we want to walk you through, which we've talked about with the board, but we'll provide you a couple highlights of the actions that are designed to support those strategies. So next slide. Next. Yeah, and again, with each one of these, there's the strategy, the action, and then measures of success. So if you go to the next slide, I believe. Yeah, a couple things to highlight here. Obviously, the past year has been very difficult on the workforce within the community, and we still have high unemployment rates and a lot of folks that are struggling. And so really a number of the recommendations here are meant to be, really looking at short term and some things that are happening that we think can continue into the next year. Certainly utilizing any federal resources, much like you did with the CARES program for innovation and experimentation and direct service through partnerships with community organizations, through new models of how to deliver those services. We think that that's an action that can be taken to help mitigate some of that impact that we're seeing on residents. We certainly learned in the last year, I think, that there are a lot of additional partners out there in the community and at the neighborhood and community level that can support workforce recovery type of activities, whether that's training, looking at positioning into new jobs and opportunities. And so looking at funding and ways for Workforce Solutions and others to partner more directly at the neighborhood level and in populations or for populations that have been left out in the past and has certainly been negatively impacted that we've seen over the last year by the COVID pandemic. I think next slide, please. And so you'll see some measures of success throughout here. I think, again, this idea of partnering, and I think looking at the number of employers that are partnering to focus on Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian workers is a new way of developing and sourcing diverse talent. I think looking at funding streams that are outside of the traditional or normal Workforce Solutions department funding streams to allow the flexibility in the kind of innovation that we've seen in the past year. And some other areas in terms of looking at culturally appropriate training programs and also encouraging more employers to participate in the Earn and Learn program, which has proven to be a valuable resource. Next slide. Again, similarly, I guess we'll go to the next slide. Strategy 6 that we've highlighted is really looking at pathways for entrepreneurship. As I mentioned, we think that there's a significant growth potential in Black, Latinx, Asian, and Indigenous business ownership. I think as we saw in the data, there has been a lending gap in terms of that community. And so there are areas both in terms of lending and technical assistance that we've highlighted as actions that can be undertaken to support, especially coming out of this year. I think capital infusion and as well as that technical assistance to help businesses become more resilient in the future is going to be critically important. I think we've talked also about racial inclusion, equity, and belonging in procurement policies. And that's both Ramsey County looking at that internally and taking the leadership to make those changes happen, but also then to be that leader in the community and work with other businesses on that. And I think trying to look at private sector investments, lending practices, and spending. I think there's the purchasing power that exists in Ramsey County that can be better aligned with helping to grow those types of businesses in the community. And it's something that initiative that can be undertaken to do that. And I think also looking at on the right side here, looking at influencing and coordinating strategies with commercial lenders to respond to the historic underinvestment in Black-owned businesses in the community. And so looking at strategies to do that is something that we're calling for. And there's a couple other things looking at entrepreneurial spaces throughout the county. There's a desire to look at different kinds of startup or co-working spaces throughout the county. And so that's an area that further down the road, but something that we're recommending. Next slide. And yeah, some measures of success, obviously looking at the data and really trying to improve the gaps that we saw and increase the overall investments in the community. Next slide. Next, yeah, strategy 7, attract and grow high wage industry and innovation. Again, we think that as we look at that data, there's certainly some areas for entrepreneurial activity, overall just entrepreneurship and also in the tech sector that are areas for growth. And so we've highlighted some actions there. Luckily, I think the community had already built a base through the Ramsey County Means Business website and other tools that are related to that. So partly these actions are more keep doing what you're doing and accelerate some of the activities that we saw. Next slide. And the final recommendation strategy is here around business retention and expansion. So there's a couple of tactical ideas here. One is really looking at expanding the network of business advisors to targeted geographies. Also looking at programs like the Minnesota Deed Shovel Ready site certification to really improve the access and the availability of sites within the community. Also things like looking at investing and advocating for small business organizations and ethnic and place-based CDFIs, again, to try to help mitigate that capital gap that we saw in Black, Latinx, minority, and Indigenous business-owned businesses. I think that's it. And then obviously you see here some of the measures of success that we'll track in terms of number of businesses invested, increase in shovel-ready sites and the like. Next slide. So that concludes my section. Back to you, Carrie.
Thanks. I'd actually like to kick it to Tawana before we talk about kind of next steps in terms of Ramsey County's process. For Tawana, any final words in the conclusion?
I don't have any final words.
Right, that sounds good. Next slide. I just want to remind us all that what you saw today is not the full report. We just extracted some of the key recommended actions to walk you through, but to find the full report, please go to this link. Next slide, please. So we've demonstrated the location of the plan. We have a future presentation kind of co-hosting with the City of St. Paul and Dr. Kirsten Delegard with Mapping Prejudice to talk about the then and now in terms of the housing landscape. And that's on April 8th, 6 to 8 p.m. And in terms of next step, you'll notice that the recommended actions stretch between 2022 and 24. The thought process is that these recommended actions are going to help inform what will be 2 budget cycles in terms of building capacity, both from a programmatic standpoint and also staffing and infrastructure as well. There's a lot of capacity building that needs to happen as a result of this plan to see the work through. But at this time, before we go into questions, I do want to make sure that there's ample time for thank yous. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that help to contribute to make this plan possible. And in addition to those that you see on your screen, the consultant team also included Josh Devine, Jerry Paytas, Christina Harold, Monica Hirschberger, Joe Mancosi, D'Angelo Svenkeson, Devonna Pittman, and Andrea Firstan. And I know I'm missing individuals. So thank you to all. In terms of Ramsey County, we had considerable amount of participation from our communications department, policy and planning, housing stability, regional rail, workforce solutions. This is a plan that's shared by the entire county. Certainly economic growth and community investment. We share this plan. We helped, the departments helped inform the recommended actions. But I want to also make sure that the individual behind the scene that really helped make this day possible is Martha Faust, the dependable, organized, passionate, and thoughtful Martha. Martha was the project manager and deserves a huge amount of kudos for persevering through a very tumultuous year. And I said in the beginning, but Martha said recently, this is the end of the beginning. And that's what this is. We're excited for our collective energy to help inform what will be an ambitious budget, and we plan to put this to work in the coming months. So it's no coincidence that this is running parallel with our budget process. And for that, I will pause and open up for any questions.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And I just want to point out this might be our best attended county board workshop in our history, with more than 69 people coming in and out throughout the workshop. So it's because it is such an exciting day and really important as we build out the plan and then put the plan into action. So we have a number of questions. I'm going to start with Commissioner Carter and then McGuire and Fretham.
You know what? I am totally guilty. I cannot find the way to put up the clapping hands. And so I just have to register also on the thanks. Just to say, yes, thank you so much, Carrie, for your leadership. You know, thank you also to Martha. Thank you to Tawana, but to all who have participated. This plan has been coming for a long time, and the building of it has been an iterative process. I am so thankful for the inclusion of so many in our community, and particularly those representing the most impacted communities. We stand to benefit from a plan which I just loved what Tawana said, which actually centers the thought of diversity as a strength. So often we hear that, but we don't see it in the actions that are taken. This plan not only iterates the need, the challenge, and the opportunity, but it also centers the strategies and the actions and the accountability elements to be sure that we're lifting it off the page for the future. And mentioning lifting it off the page, I have to say thank you so much to the artists, because clearly traditional artwork would not work to illustrate what we need to in terms of the transformative nature, not only of the plan, but of the outcomes that it is intended to produce as we work to hold ourselves accountable with our community. So I just had to express that as thanks. I do not have a question. I look so forward to the ongoing work of engaging with our community and centering equity as we implement the strategies and actions in the plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. And you're right about the artwork. It is incredibly beautiful. I hope you all go back and look at it slowly and see all the work with even the shape of the R throughout the artwork is really beautiful. So thank you. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you're right. We could study that artwork. I think you can't hear me. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we could all study that artwork and find all those wonderful nuances, like you just mentioned, the R, and just everything has meaning in that art, and it's so exciting to see it. So thanks so much for the vision to actually have artists do this work, and then for the artists, of course, to do it. So thanks for that. So also gratitude for the whole plan. I mean, I love that it's the end of the beginning, and now we're going to keep moving forward. This is very exciting. I'm going to ask a question that you've heard me ask before, and it involves someone I think we all know and love by now, but Ling especially. You know, I have a very dedicated minority woman-owned business in my district. Ling, Hyun Kim owns Minbest. It's an engineering firm, and she continues to have issues with trying to get work in Ramsey County. So I just want to know that with a plan like this, that we're going to be able to provide opportunities for these type of business. I know we want to develop pathways to entrepreneurship for Black, Latinx, Asian, and Indigenous business owners. So we have business owners in our community that I want to make sure they're going to have opportunities to get business, in Ramsey County, and maybe you could just give me some hope that will be more likely coming up. I know there's a bidding process. I know all of this, but I just am looking for the, how are we going to make sure that the businesses we have in place right now are actually going to be able to, are going to get business. So thank you, Madam Chair.
I think that's one of the things I could speak to in the plan that we heard both from you all, but also from the steering committee. And as we had the joint sessions with elected officials, we heard really loud and clear was the need to be intentional. So we have added some additional language in the specific actions and measurables in the plan to speak to both the need to not only see the pipelines increase, but to also incorporate the work that's in this plan with those departments inside Ramsey County who are also looking at procurement. So we've just in the last few weeks spoken to those teams about how to make sure this plan isn't so separate, but is also embedded in that work inside the county about procurement, and making sure that as you all go into those measurables and budget setting that Carrie spoke about earlier, that these things work hand in hand. And at the same time, outside of Ramsey County, that as we're looking at the private sector and other city governments, that the plan is a tool for them to be intentional about the measurements that are in place for spending dollars with those businesses, and that some of the narrative change work that takes place about how we elevate those businesses, like the one that you just mentioned, how we can give them a greater profile, so that as a large number of corporations across Ramsey County and the Twin Cities, for that matter, have made commitments over the last year to say we're going to spend more dollars with Black, Indigenous, Asian, and Latinx owned businesses in the Twin Cities as a part of their equity commitments, that we can promote and elevate so they know exactly who those businesses are and can increase and then measure those spends in partnership with the, in particular, I would say one example is the partnership that Ramsey County and other corporations have with the Center and our Economic Justice Trust. And have committed to measure those spending and to see how many family sustaining jobs does that spending create in our communities, and in this case in particular with Ramsey County. So that's part of some of the measurables that we've added into the plan just behind Strategy 6.
Well, I really appreciate that. And of course, we all want to hear that this is, countywide, that this is not just this department obviously doing this work. I mean, this has got to permeate through all of the departments, through Public Works and through everything. And I'm glad to hear that. And of course, it's not just about the one example I gave. It is really about companies and businesses like that, that we just want to make sure we elevate to a point where they can get business. And we can't give everyone business all the time, but at least give them some hope that that there will be a greater effort to really make sure that they can get business in Ramsey County. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Is anything else, Commissioner McGuire, before we move on?
I'm good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Fetham, and then McDonough and Reinhardt.
Thank you, Chair Mattis Castillo. Full disclosure, I don't know how much of this is just comment and how much will be actual questions. I think I have 4 actual questions. But first and foremost, I just want to express my excitement for this and acknowledge that this is probably going to make folks uncomfortable. There are folks just in general who are uncomfortable when we talk about things like race, equity, and diversity. But we need to say that if we believe every person has innate human dignity and we're all equal, but then we can see systemic disparities in outcomes across the board, whether it's wealth, income, educational attainment, health outcomes. If you really believe we are all equal and equally valuable and worthy, then you need to recognize that there is something else at play, that there is a systemic problem, and systemic problems require systemic solutions. So I am thrilled with this and the way it comes at this approach in a really comprehensive way. And it's important work that needs to move forward. And one example of that is, I'm really excited about this idea of an equitable development policy that we're thinking about. Where is that development occurring? And I think that really goes hand in hand with something that I keep bringing up for 21st century parks, which is like a comprehensive open space policy, because the problem is we keep feeling this tension between anytime there's an opportunity to develop well, what about parks? What about open space? We need that too. And I was talking to someone the other day, and it's, as a human being, I need water and I need oxygen. And they're both important and valuable, but when I'm drowning, you don't need to throw more water at me. So really understanding where we are, we know that right now we do not have enough housing. We are out of that oxygen. So it doesn't make sense if our park system, which I am so proud of, and it is so robust and beautiful, if that is enough, we don't need to throw more water there when people need oxygen. So really excited about that. There was also mention about just the importance of local jurisdiction, collaboration, and outreach. And this is one of the things I'd love to hear more about and follow up. And I think it's really important that as we reach out, we're respecting each of those individual governments within cities and townships, and also their residents, who often don't necessarily think of themselves first as Ramsey County residents. They see themselves as a city resident first. So understanding that where those residents are and being really thoughtful about that outreach to meet people where they're at and understanding and recognizing the different dynamics of each of those cities. And I say that as someone who represents the most different jurisdictions here, that they all have their individual personality and flavor. And we can't just say, oh, you're a Ramsey County city, so here is your one size fits all approach to outreach and engagement. Another question, and this, I think this comes to, there was a mention of a hiring certification program for businesses. I want to hear more about that, but it brings to me the idea of recognition in general. Like, how are we recognizing our jurisdictions, partners, and businesses who are really supportive and collaborative in this idea of an inclusive economic economy? How do we recognize them and build them up and share with others? Because there are a lot of folks who are going to support this and who are going to want to support those businesses that are committed to this, who are going to want to encourage their city to get a recognition level for inclusive economy work. So I think that's something, you know, another type of carrot that we can put out there to really incentivize engagement in that work. And then also just recognizing as well as I really want to encourage businesses to join us and to partner in this and to invest in this idea, but to ensure also that we are setting standards to make sure those jobs are really living wage jobs. You know, it doesn't do us a lot of good to honor businesses that are, you know, perpetuating a cycle of poverty for families who are working full time. And then for the small business piece, it's really hitting close to home right now. My husband's in the process of starting a small business and getting a small business loan. And just wanting to note the interactions with other systems here. You know, when you're applying for an SBA loan, you need to submit a report of your criminal history as an applicant. So recognizing significant disparate criminal justice interactions for different communities is also a factor. And how do we work with our county attorney and the, you know, expungement processes that we've already identified to collaborate there and help potential entrepreneurs. And then also what work can we do on statewide opportunities? The most obvious one coming to mind is efforts to legalize marijuana, and knowing the disproportionate impact of drug convictions and how those interplay. We don't want a situation in which our communities of color have been disproportionately impacted by criminal justice interventions related to marijuana use and possession, and then because of those records be locked out of an opportunity to become an entrepreneur in that area. So really, what are we doing statewide? And I swear this is my last one. Questions about ongoing community engagement or even governance on these efforts. You know, how are we using our community obviously we used our community to develop this plan. How will they be continually involved in this process to be monitoring that what we are doing is working, that we're seeing the outcomes we're intending, and if not, how do we like reassess and redirect those efforts, and just interested in how the community will be both engaged and in a power sharing relationship in that capacity. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. I don't know, that was a lot of questions. I don't know that we'll get them all answered here, but does anyone want to take a stab at any of them?
I can, I'll have Tawana speak to public-private opportunities, and then maybe segue to the kind of implementation piece of the plan. I can take some of that. So go ahead, Tawana.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Fretham. Great elevated opportunities. I think as I captured notes on those, I would say in a simple yes, yes, and yes, and amen. I think all of those are opportunities that some we've talked about, some we had not talked about, and I think can be elevated for the implementation side of things within a number of departments. I think one of the best things that we've seen throughout this planning process is a lot of readiness and interest amongst many Ramsey County departments to be able to incorporate and partner with Carrie and Ling's departments in the implementation side of things. And I don't think we've run into one instance where there wasn't alignment when we took something to a team and said, hey, does this this fit? Can we align? Can we partner? Are we way off base? There's been a lot of alignment and synergy and willingness to go the distance to be able to go into the next phase of work. In particular, as it relates to the state policy and efforts to impact and synergize, whether it's the marijuana legislation that you referenced, or just how various systems, particularly as we've seen responding to COVID-19 and lending and opportunities for entrepreneurs, those are opportunities that are going to continue to come up, whether it is for entrepreneurship and business growth or how it impacts individuals as they pursue housing, because we know it has many impacts there as well. I think those are key opportunities. And to the extent that Ramsey County now has an opportunity with CARES 2.0 to use some resources, both for internal infrastructure in ways that we couldn't deploy those resources before, as well as external impacts, that I think will give these departments the staffing that's necessary to take full opportunity and full advantage of some of those opportunities that right now you don't fully have the strength and resource and capacity just to do all the time. And for implementation, I would just throw one in to say those opportunities are at the ready, both internally and externally, and that capacity to pull the levers, we're certainly standing by and wanting to be able to support and move forward with.
And Madam Chair and Commissioners, I'll just add to that we made a commitment to our municipal partners that participate in our quarterly economic development summits that we would co-create programs that were functional at both the county and the city level, that they would provide their feedback, so that if there was a program that wasn't going to, was going to duplicate or expand or amplify some of their efforts, that we're working in coordination with them. And additionally, this is a plan that's not intended to sit on a shelf, a virtual shelf, or anything. This is a plan that's going to evolve as our changes evolve, or our needs evolve. And as we find our way out of this pandemic, the areas of focus may change. The kind of core pieces of the plan will stay intact. However, we know that as these recommended actions and the plan evolve, that community will be guiding those efforts. And to Tawana's point, in terms of capacity building, small business advisory councils, coalitions with our small business organizations, we've heard a lot of feedback as a result of the first round of CARES Act funding. And that feedback cannot be exclusive to how we use federal dollars. It will need to be inclusive of how we spend our resources and our time and our energy reliably annually moving forward. So that will be a critical piece of advancing this plan.
Commissioner, if I could respond.
Oh, yep.
Commissioner, could I respond to the first point? I'm sorry, there were so many great points, Commissioner Breatham. I didn't respond to the very first one related to the employer certification piece and workforce development. We have, our team at the center has been working with Ling and her team on that point specifically, and how we can build out there, as we often focus very heavily on the job training, the worker training side of things. We've been working with Ling and her team on how we go deeper in ensuring that employers who are leaning into inclusivity, many not just the large employers, but those mid and small employers who are doing the deep work of hiring with a lot of intentionality on diversity, inclusivity, and equity, and how we can elevate them. So to your point, they do get that recognition. They continue to do the hard work, and those who may not have leaned into it, but can see the value of that. We are also in continued conversations and partnership with Ling and Deed, so that more resources and dollars from the state can be used that way. And even just this week, working with our own partnership to push the legislature to also recognize the importance of allocating dollars and resources to that side as well. And so I think that's one that is at the ready even right now, that Ramsey County's leadership in this way can really help move our state forward. And we've continued to elevate that in partnership with Ling and other places across the state, and looking for examples where sometimes it's being done but not spoken about in the same way, where we can use that leverage so that resources become more flexible in ways that in the past the county has not had the opportunity to use those workforce dollars in that way to drive the sort of outcomes we all want to see. So I do think that's one that we'll start to see real traction on sooner than later.
Thank you, Tawana. I saw the county manager might have a comment. You unmuted. Are you good? Do you want to add something?
I appreciate it, Madam Chair. I'll just add it now and then I'll go back and listen. I think the biggest encouragement I would just add to the overarching comments is even in the context of when this plan started to be created to the world we are now living in, there's a fundamental difference in terms of opportunity, speed, and windows that we need to pursue. And we need to think about the things that are one-time infusions relative to the ongoing resource build. If you do an ongoing resource build with your one-time money, you create a back-end problem that leads to a potential housing affordability issue, quite frankly, right? So we have to be thoughtful. But particularly, I wanted to draw the attention to when we think about strategies 1 and 2 in this plan, and the current availability of federal funds now, and the conversation around an infrastructure bill before this year ends, I would only say that the timelines here aren't aggressive enough. And if we want to go from word to action in terms of inclusivity and like really building it, I think we're going to have to consider how we hit the gas pedal hard and bring along everybody who wants to come. And if they say, but we need it until 2024, we got to think about where to take the opportunity while it sits here in front of us, because it's all time limited. But there's a once in a generation feeling around strategies 1 and 2. And I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. Commissioner McDonough, thanks for being patient and waiting.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. All great comments and a good day here. I want to start off with, Carrie, something that you had said in part of your opening comments here. You referenced in these times, there can be an apathy or a numbness to the work of equity. And I would agree with that. But I also feel a strong sense of weariness in separating the talk from the action. And so today I just want to acknowledge and celebrate an action plan that is before us to do better in our community. I also want to acknowledge that we can't celebrate this without accepting the responsibility for success. We can't celebrate this without accepting that responsibility. So today I feel like we've got 2 things in front of us. One is to accept and celebrate this work that so many put so much into, and some strong leadership and courage in our community to get us to here. But at the same time, we all have to go away with this, having the confidence that as a team, we are accepting the responsibility for that success to make a difference in our community. So I really do want to take that moment to celebrate that effort, the leadership, the success. Carrie called out Martha a couple times. I've gotten to know Martha over the past few years, and I know she's a silent hero in our organization, and not to call anybody out, but this is a moment to recognize the work that Martha has put into this, and I really appreciate that Carrie called her out, and it's a really great team here. But I also am going to commit to being responsible for the success. And I so appreciate the work that you put in this plan. You put success indicators for everything there. And Carrie, acknowledging that it's fluid and flexible, and we're going to have to adjust as we hear from community. But when I say for the success in making a difference in our community, it has to be that success that is defined by our community, not defined necessarily by us, because we have to acknowledge, or I have to acknowledge that we've gotten here by policies, by actions that we've taken in the past that have actually led us to where we're at today. And being a part of that needs to be, and I just feel really grateful that I can be a part of a plan here to help actually disassemble and dismantle things that have been put in place that many times I've been a part of. And you guys have laid out a roadmap here for us to be able to do that. I appreciate that work. I appreciate that opportunity. And then to Ryan's last comments, and I really appreciate the sense of urgency, but then also understanding the opportunities and the capacity. And that's going to be part of the balance here is of managing expectations in parts of our community that are so hungry for change, and aligning that with us to build that capacity to bring that sense of urgency to have rapid change in our community and to seize those opportunities. And Ryan, I think I heard it in your comments, but part of this weariness of separating the talk from action is finding the willing partners to move forward on. And yes, we have to do a lot of work because we have to bring people along. We can't do this alone, and we need to bring people along. but we also owe it to our community to find those willing partners to be able to accelerate this work where we can accelerate it and when we can accelerate it. So with that, Carrie and everybody here and everybody listening and everybody on your acknowledgement list there, thanks for the great work. And I really do want to take a moment and celebrate that.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonough. Your words are really on point as we do this work and move forward. I want to go to Commissioner Reinhardt, who has also been waiting very patiently and has worked. And I just want to say a thank you to Commissioner Reinhardt as Vice Chair of the HRA as well, has really put in time and effort and support in this plan as we move to the next steps as well. So, Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Commissioner Manis-Castillo. When this first came out, I think my response in email was just one word, and that was wow. Because yes, it is a time to celebrate, but it's a time to celebrate because of the journey we are on and the fact that we now have in many ways, a roadmap. And we just need to get on that road and step on the gas where we can, along with the community being in the car with us. And that's really what it comes down to, community involvement. I do have one more person that I want to acknowledge and call out. And that is when I first became a county commissioner, it was Commissioner Ortega that from the very beginning was raising this flag and beating the drum and everything that he could to say we need to do things differently. And it's been a long, okay, I got to say goodbye to my husband. Bye. he's waving at me and I'm ignoring him. But anyway, he's going to work. Anyway, we have taken so many steps, and I just, when I first saw this, one of the things that I thought about was those very first meetings and the steps that we took, and they were baby steps because there wasn't the acknowledgement of what had come before or really a roadmap of where we could go next. So Raphael, I just want to acknowledge that history of being a change maker, and it's taken a long time, but I think right now we're at a spot, I know we're at a spot where we are unified in our message. We have had so many new ideas and different things that have come along over the years that have made today possible. The staff work, Martha, I mean, everybody that was a part of this. It hasn't been an easy road to get to, and there have been a lot of bumps and a lot of changes of what we thought we needed, and then finding out that that wasn't what we needed. And it came down to community involvement and engagement. So we're all in it. We're all in it together, but we have a different role to play. And that's what makes this such an exciting time. Our communities and how we, are looking at this not as a cookie cutter. It doesn't work that way. It's not the way life works. So how could we expect this to work this way? And dismantling and rebuilding in a different way, we can do it because, as Commissioner McDonough said, we've got partners. We've got commitment to success, and that will be here long after we're gone, the changes that we make. So it is an exciting, being a county commissioner is an exciting journey no matter how you look at it, but right now is just such a dynamic time, and the position that we're in and the fact that we're all really united in getting this done. So as far as some of the, I don't know that they're questions really, but there are so many different aspects of this as we move forward. And I think probably Commissioner Fretham, well, she did ask some of the questions that I had, but the deep dive that we need to do on everything from insurance and liability to allowing for collaborations when we put out an RFP, because sometimes we put out an RFP that, quite frankly, small businesses couldn't answer to. Well, so how come we don't make it so that we can, in wherever we can, that we do things that have multiple, you can submit something that's multiple. Some of them you can, but some of them you can't. And so it pushes people out that want to apply, but they just can't do it because they can't meet the requirements. And so there are so many different parts of that, and that's in the procurement area, but there's the employment. There are within each of our municipalities, how do we move forward with some of the changes that we need to do? It's not something that we can do on our own. And I think that's been eloquently stated by everybody on this board. We can't do this alone. Not from a policy level, not from an implementation level, but we're going to move forward with this. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight. We need to look at the big picture, but in order to really make change, we need to do it from the micro level. And so celebrating the big picture, the roadmap, but again, repeating what my colleagues have said, is it's about what we do on the ground, and that involves community. I was during the 15 minutes that we had between the county board meeting and this, I was on the phone with a constituent who was talking about different issues, but really talking about, we need to make sure that we're involving the community in every decision we make. Because if we decide on our own what they need, we're likely wrong. And so let's figure it out together, and involving the community in every aspect of this is really where we're going to have success. We're not going to do it on our own. That's where we get success, is by involving those that are involved in figuring out what can we do to make that happen. So I will get off of my soapbox now, but like I said, I don't think there's really questions in there, but just a hyper alertness to what we need to do at the micro level to involve people and make this a success. But it is an exciting time, lots of people to thank. And now we get down to the hard work of implementation as quickly as we can. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Reinhardt. Commissioner Ortega, with a nice introduction by Commissioner Reinhardt.
Well, thank you for that, Victoria. First of all, I want to echo what all my colleagues said. The staff has done a fantastic job during very difficult times. So I won't, keep harping on that, because I think you all know that we appreciate all your good work. It's really fantastic. I like Victoria's word of a roadmap. That's exactly what we have. And I just want to say, we just begin the journey, and we will stumble, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with stumbling here and there. We just begin the journey, and as we stumble, we pick ourselves up and get it right and move forward. So it's very impressive. There's not much more I could say, except that we need to just keep on the journey and not be fearful of stumbling. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ortega. When we started on this journey, in one of our early meetings, Josh Devine, who previously with the Center for a Fourth Economy, said something that has stuck with me. And he said that if we had enough affordable housing in Ramsey County, we could close the wealth gap between communities of color and white communities in one generation. And that has stuck with me throughout this whole process. And knowing that and not doing something about it is not an option. We must do it. And so that's why this is so exciting, is that we have the opportunity to close the wealth gap in one generation, and we're here to do that. And so I'm really excited about this plan. And so as we wrap here in just a moment, Commissioner McDonough, I saw your hand go up and down, and I wanted to give you the opportunity if you had one more thought. Okay, you're good. Any final thoughts, closing comments, County Manager, any final thoughts as we close out today?
Madam Chair, just on the budget side, the HRA levy piece will be a component of the proposed 22-23 county budget. And if anyone on this call is surprised at that by now, I don't know what else we could have done. And that work's been being laid for a while, and that's a big first step. And I think April 13th, we'll start talking about American Rescue Plan priorities there as well. We got to watch this $3 trillion infrastructure bill very closely, because in defining what we know, I think we might learn some new things too about potential opportunity that we don't even fully understand today, that 3 weeks from now might feel different. So thank you for letting me lay out the process and for today's workshop.
Great, thank you. Carrie, final thoughts from you or your team and all your awesome work?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. A big thank you to you and your leadership, to County Manager O'Connor and Deputy County Manager Berg for the support to launch a plan such as this. It did not get here without contracts being approved, funding being set aside, and the direction that you provided over this last year. You're all equity minded. At the core of your leadership is equity, and so we would not be here without all of you. The other thing is, with 2022 initiatives identified in this plan, it certainly is an ambitious schedule. However, you've got, you're probably aware of this, but very aggressive directors that are already putting the infrastructure in place to launch many of these recommended actions here in 21. So to County Manager O'Connor's point, we're going to turn over every stone in terms of funding to drive these initiatives and to partner with the agencies like the Center for Economic Inclusion to ensure we're doing it the right way. And the last piece that I want to add is, during a very kind of overwhelming time, Tawana said, you know, Carrie, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And we're going to be doing this work for a while. And I'm just so proud of this roadmap to at least get us out of the starting block. So thanks again for your leadership and for your support. And we're off to the races.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for all the great work. And here we go. We're ready for the race now. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you this afternoon.
Thank you.
Well done.
Great job. Good going, everyone. Nice job, Trista. Good job.